Hello my friends, today we are on Photoshop and we will be talking about the TK8 panel. This is one of my favorite plugins. Actually, if I could only have two plugins ever for the rest of my life, that would be the TK8 and Topaz Denoise. Those are two plugins I cannot live without, and I use them every day in my workflow. So you'll find your TK8 once you install it under plugins, and you see I have TK8 Combo, TK8 CX, and TK8 Multi-Mask. All three of these, it comes with your TK8 when you purchase it. Now TK8 Combo is this one over here, and TK8 CX is this long one over here. And these two, they are exactly the same, just arranged differently. So all the buttons are over here, they're also over here. So you do not need to keep on your so you do not have to have both of them open. You can just choose one, whichever one seems easier for you to use. And for me, I like the TK8 CX, which is this long one. I just find it, I don't know, it fits more nicely on the side of my screen over here. So I never really use the TK8 Combo. They are, again, the same thing. You will not be missing anything if you only use one. They are the same exact thing. So to keep things easy, I will close out of that one and just keep this one on. And then we have the TK8 mask, which looks like this. Now, what's the difference between mask and this TK8 CX? Well, this one, it's not meant for making mask, though. Although you could make a mask, for example, they do have the subject selection tool over here and the sky selection. So you see, if I just click this, it will select my subject. You see we have these marching ants over here. So you could be doing that. I'll do Command D to deselect that. And you can also select the sky. But main usage for this panel is to give you shortcuts for Photoshop. So who is this for? If you're new to Photoshop and you do not know all the shortcuts, or you don't know a lot of the shortcuts, then this will come in very handy because it has one button, push it, and you will get into the deep menu of Photoshop, finding the things you will use most of the time. What do I mean by that? I'm just gonna go through a few of these buttons so you see what I'm talking about. This first one over here, it will open all your adjustment layers. So once you click on it, this is your adjustment layers. And if you don't use this TK8, you'll have to go over here into adjustment layers and you'll find the same things. The next one, it's the live clipping, and when you click this, you will see on your image where you are clipping the highlights. So for example, if I make a curves adjustment layer and I bring in the brightness and we have this clicked, you will see with the red, it will show what I am blowing the highlights over there. I am going to delete that. And let's see, turn off the clipping mask. Oops, sorry. Great. Over here where it says TK, this is where you can go into your settings and you can increase the saturation of your buttons, turn on and off different tools, and just make this panel work the way you want it to work. I'm going to X out of this. Over here we have a new document. If you want to open a new document, then you will click this and it will take you there. This is undo and this is redo, going back and forward between your editing. Then we have the zoom in and zoom out. This is the fit to screen button, and this is go zoom in into 100%. So for example, if I want to see this image at 100% zoom, I will just click this button and it zooms into 100%. Back to screen just like that. If you do not want to use this button, you'll have to press Z, for example, on your keyboard, and then you have this fit to screen, fill screen, and 100% on the top. And this is how you would go through this. Command 0 to fit to screen. I'll be honest, I don't use these buttons. I like to use shortcuts just because I'm used to that and it works great for me. Then we have shortcuts for getting a black brush. So if you see, I press here, I get the black brush, the color on the left on the color swatches, it turns to black, and now I have a black brush. The tools automatically goes to brush. If I want the white brush, I will just click on that and I get a white brush. If I go to the green one, that is the color brush, and here I get to choose whichever color I want. And then the one handy one it's the gray brush. This will give you a 50% gray, and that in order to get it, you would have to go through a few buttons to get to it. But this one is just easy, one button, and that works. Then we also have the most used blending modes, so normal and color, screen, all that stuff, overlay, you have it here. So let's see, if I duplicate this layer, Command J, I can use like let's say a screen blending mode, and I am lightening the image, and that's just by pushing one button to get in our blending modes instead of going over here, so we can choose our blending modes. Great, so those are blending modes. Then we have duplicate image, one button, size. You can resize your image over there. Flatten, this is the one button I use all the time. So let's say I have a few adjustment layers. I'm gonna add a curve and levels. And then I just wanna flatten my image. Normally you would have to right click on a layer and go to flatten image. But with this button over here, just makes it really handy. You just click on flatten and there you go, we flatten our image. Then you can work on your canvas if you want to resize your canvas and so on. Over here you have the new layer button, so once you click it, it just creates a empty pixel layer. Then moving on, you have the stamp visible, and the stamp visible is the same thing when you have multiple curves. And let's see, I'm gonna duplicate the background, and you have a whole bunch of layers, and then you wanna stamp visible. That means it makes a picture of everything you have all together into a new layer. So it doesn't flatten the image, it just makes a stamp layer. And this is the way it works. Once you click it, it creates the stamp layer, which is a layer that represents all the changes and adjustments that you made below. If you do not have that button, the way you will do it, the shortcut for it is Command, Option, Shift, and E, and that will create the same stamp layer. So that's how that one works. Over here we have the invert contents of a pixel layer or mask. So that means with this image, if I just want to invert it, which you probably don't need to do this very often, is Command I, and now we get this weird looking thing, Command I to switch it again. But where this button comes in handy is, for example, let's say we want to make a mask. I'm just going to make a mask of our subject, and there you go, we're selecting the subject, and I'll put it to a mask. So now with this mask selected, we have with white we are showing the subject, and black it's hiding, so that's we're selecting the subject, not the background. If we want to select the background and not the subject, then you'll click this button and it will inverse your mask, and now we're hiding the subject and we're revealing the background. So that's how that button works. Then we have duplicate layer. So let's say we want to duplicate this layer. You will just go and click on it and it will duplicate the layer. Over here we'll turn our layer selected into a smart object. So let's say I have this layer selected and I want to turn it into a smart object. You just click this button and you see this symbol into the corner that's showing us that this is a smart object. I'm gonna go Command Z, and normally if you wanna do the same thing without using the panel, you will have to right click and go to convert to smart object, and that will do the same thing. But now with just one button, and you see we have this red border around it that tells us this is a smart object. There is also, you might see I believe it's a blue border, and that means you have a different kind of smart object. This is a smart object that we created in Photoshop. And if you have the blue border, that is a smart object that you imported the image as a smart object. Let's say from Lightroom, you wanted to import an image as a smart object into Photoshop, then that button will be blue and it will tell you what kind of smart object you have. Let's see. Moving on, this is the group. So let's say I have a layer and I have a curve and I want to group these two layers together. I can select them and then easily just group them by pushing the button, and now we have the group with both layers inside them. Great. We have the delete. If we want to delete, let's say this group, I have it selected, now just click the trash and we delete it. We have the burn and dodge tool that we can use, and over here we have the toggle between removing and adding a layer mask to active layer. So what does that mean? Let's duplicate this layer. Let's make our subject mask again. So I'll click on select subject. I'll put it as a mask, and now with the mask selected, if we click on this plus minus, you see we can see without the mask, with the mask, without the mask, with the mask. It did delete our selection that we had, so now we're just adding and removing the mask. I do not use that button. As you could see, I was surprised by that result. I did not know that that was erasing it. This button over here, it creates a black mask. So if we want a black mask, let's say we want to make a curves adjustment layer and we want to brighten the image, and the curves just came with a mask, but you know, by clicking the black mask, now it turns into a black mask. If you do not have any mask, you will still add the black mask. And now with B for a brush tool and with white, we can just reveal the effect wherever we want. And that's what you would use a black mask for. Then we have a clipping, and you would often use clipping when you have a few layers and some adjustment layers, and then you will just want to clip your adjustment to the layer below. Then you will click on clipping and it will do so. You can also use a clipping mask for, let's say you want to make a knockout type design kind of thing. I will turn off my background and let's see, I will type something. I'll just type something, doesn't matter what. I'll just say Skyler. I'll put my text underneath, and now with the picture selected, if I go on the clipping, it will give us that knockout design, and now we can move the image underneath, and you see we have this cool effect where we have a type with the design from this image. Great. I'm gonna turn my background back and erase these two layers. Let's move on. Over here we have the delete hidden layers. Often you'll have a million layers that you're working with, and then some layers you might decide that was not something you want to, and you'll turn them off the visibility, and then you just want to delete them so it doesn't take so much, make your computer go a little bit faster. Photoshop works faster, and then that's what you would use for delete hidden layers. What else do we have? This button opens the menu of user saved mask on the channel panels. Often you will have to save mask for using it later, and that's where you will save them, and then you go to their channels and you can use them from there. This will toggle between viewing the composite image and viewing the layer mask of an active layer. Let's demonstrate that really quick. I'll go back to I should have just saved that mask into my channel so I can just reuse it over and over. But I didn't, so there you go. So now that we have this, if we click these two arrows, you will see we see the mask where we can adjust the mask and do a better selection. And there we see our image and back the mask, and that will come in handy many times. We have the toggle disable and enable for the layer mask of the active layer. So I'll go back to my mask, and there you go. We can deactivate the mask and activate it. So there you go, just like that. All right. Then we have the stroke dialog. If you work with shapes and text, then you might want to do a stroke or a fill over here. This little teardrop, it's a shortcut for the Gaussian blur. So if you click on it, it opens the Gaussian blur dialog, just like that. I will cancel that. If you do not use this panel, you would have to go to filters, blur, and Gaussian blur. And that's how you would get to it. So that, as you can see, it was a lot faster to just push one button. Then over here, we have the free transform mode. This is open camera raw filter. So when you are on a layer and you want to go to camera raw, you just push this button, and there you go. Now we are on camera raw. We can make our edits, and then you can, okay it, and it will take your modification, bring them back into your layer over here. This opens the content aware fill function. So when I do that, we have no selection. We have to make a selection. So let's say I will take my lasso tool and just make a selection around her head, and then go to content aware fill, and you are greeted with this dialog where you can do all your content aware modifications that you need, if you need to remove something in the image, and so on. I'm going to cancel out of that. And you see, every time we have a selection, like I still have the marching ends, This panel turns this colorful rainbow outline, and that tells us, hey, you have a selection. Don't forget about that. Once I do Command D to deselect it, the rainbow outline disappears. We do not have a selection made anymore. Then we have select subject. We already used that. We have select sky. We have deselect and reselect for an active selection. Save an active selection as a channel mask. And then open the feather selection dialog. So let's say we have our selection and we want to feather it. Then we will just go to this feather icon and we can add a feather of whatever radius we want. What else do we have? This opens the expand selection, and this is the contract selection. What does that mean? That means when we have a selection, we can open the expand and make the selection bigger by a certain amount of pixels, or we can make it smaller by a certain amount of pixels. That comes very handy sometimes to get rid of halos and so on. This button over here, this inverts the active selection. So let's say I just make a selection of a face. Right now I'm selecting the face, but if I click this button, now I am selecting the surrounding, just not the face. So that's how you would use that. Command D to deselect. This button over here toggles on and off the selection marching ends. If you find them distractive, you just push this and you can hide them and bring them back on. The next button over here is select and mask dialog and opens refine edge. What does that mean? Well, let's say I'm selecting my subject again, and now I want to refine the edge because it's not the perfect selection. Well, just by pushing this button, now we are into the refine edge, and we can use our refine edge tools to make better selection around it. And then you can output it to new layer, selection layer mask, a new layer with layer mask, and whatever you would want from over there. So that is the shortcut for that. Command D to deselect. And then you have the trash can, where you can remove all alpha masks from the channel panel. Sometimes, like I said, you will make masks in your channel to save them for later, and this comes in handy when you just want to clean it up and just delete them. The last two rows are for sharpen, for web, and if you want to add watermark and so on. Things I never use these things because I don't do any of that. Then the last row, it's very handy. It opens some new actions, if you will. So once you click it, you have a vignette, freehand vignette, spotlight, dehaze. You have all kinds of actions that you can use: clarity, clean dusk, chromatic aberration, all kinds of things. You can add, let's see, color clone. I like that one a lot. And then you can also do stacking, aligning, focus blend, and a few other things. These are very, very helpful things. I think you'll have a lot of fun playing with those. The play button over here, this is where you can use one action that you use the most, and that would be a shortcut instead of looking through your actions over here. Like if you are like me, you have a lot of actions. You see I have tons and tons of actions, and sometimes most of the time I have one that I use all the time, and that is my sharpen action. And from this panel I can just push the play button and that plays my sharpen action. And you can choose a radius and so on, and that's what just plays it right away. I don't have to go look for it because I use that all the time, and it's right there. Also over here where you have your little person with the play, this is, you can put your own actions that you use all the time, so you can find them a lot faster. So it has a plus button, you can add to it, or minus, you can delete some of your actions. So for me, the ones I use very often, I have this Turner one, which just makes everything kind of painterly, and I really like the effect it does. I use it a lot on flower photography, sometimes on wildlife and landscapes, and that is one action I often use. Then what else do I have? I have a pick a color vignette. This is where, instead of just making a gray and a black and white vignette, I can just actually make a color vignette. Like, look, I can make it red, I can make it blue, and so on. So let's say blue vignette, and I say okay. And now I have a blue vignette, and that is very handy because, it just makes it a little bit more special than just a black vignette. I also have into my action, I have a scenery blending, and I'm not going to go into this one. It won't do you any good if you don't have the action. And then I also have the Orton effect, which I use a lot in my images. And there you go. Now we have an Orton effect onto this image. It just makes things a little bit more magical. So this is all the tools on this panel. Let's see about masking, because really this is where this program shines. Like I said, this other panel, if you do not know the shortcuts for Photoshop or you don't know your way around it, this comes really handy. But for those of you who are very versed in Photoshop and then, being able to make really complicated masking, this panel over here is super, super handy. How does it work? Well, we can make 4 different kinds of masks. The first one over here, you create luminosity masks. So once you click on it, you are greeted with this panel. And here we have the lights on the right, we have the shadows on the left, and we have midtones over here. So I can pick highlights and I can see which highlights do I want to choose. The more I move to the right, the less highlights it picks. So let's say I want to pick this kind of highlights, but then this second row, you have options of modifying your selection. So right now I chose the highlights, but I want to make them more white, so it selects more of it. Remember, in masking, white reveals and black hides. So I'll use a level, and now I can move the white point towards the middle, and I have a better selection of the whites I would like to make. And then I can output it over here on this black panel. It's all the ways you can output it. So you can output it as curves, as levels, brightness and contrast, hue and saturation, color grading. There's all kinds. You can dodge and burn. You can paint with color. So let's say if I don't want to do it as a curves layer. So now I have my mask that I made, and then I have my curves, and now I can just manipulate those highlights the way I want. And maybe I want to make them a little bit more golden. So I'll take the blue downs, and let's say I'll go to the reds and add some red, and there you go. Now we added some golden, highlights to the highlights. Now let's say I don't want to apply these highlights to the person. Well, it does have a calculator where you can go and subtract mask, but that just becomes a little bit more complicated. The easiest way to do this, if you, let's say you don't want to apply all this highlights adjustment to the person, the easiest way to do it is just to go into your image layer where you have your person, go back to your other panel and select subject. And then once you have your subject selected, you can go to your curve layer, Command G to group it, and then apply this as a layer mask. And now we are selecting the subject, but we want to invert it. So Command I, and now we are hiding the subject from this group. And now, as you can see, these highlights that we applied, it's only to the background. It does not affect the person. Let's go back to our masking. I'm going to delete this. So now let's say I want to work with my shadows. I can go into the left side and select my shadows, and then output them as, let's say I want to add some blue in the shadows. I can output them as a curve, and then I can just go to my blues and add some blue in the shadows. And there you go, we're color grading using the mask. That's how you use the luminosity mask over here. Then we can use, you can make zone masks by using the color picker, and you can make your zone mask, and then you can also modify them and make it the way you want to. We can do a more in-depth tutorial if you want of that. And then my favorite, one of my favorites other than luminosity, I have 2 of them that I use all the time. That is the luminosity mask and the color mask. And this makes it really easy. You just pick a color. And let's say we want to change the shirt. I pick a color. I'll say, okay, this is the mask it gives me. I can modify it a little bit, make sure I make it brighter. There you go. That looks like a good selection. And I can just do a hue saturation adjustment for that. And now we can, change the color of the shirt into whatever we want. We can colorize it, we can do whatever with our masking that it's beautifully made over here. I am going to delete that. Then over here we can make a saturation or vibrance mask. And this is, for example, if some colors are super saturated in your image and you want to tone them down, you'll use this, make a saturation mask and bring the saturation down. Or you can make a vibrance mask and bring up the saturation and just make the colors more even. This is my channels. This is where you'll find your mask that you saved into my channels. This button over here, I'll be honest with you, I've never used and I don't know exactly what it does. This one is an edge mask, and sometimes this will come in handy if you want to reduce the halos when you are sharpening. And this is the color grading button. This other button over here I never really use, and then this button, it will allow you to make a selection and edit your selection. And then we also have actions over here on these lines and buttons thing. I've never used this one. You can make some color sketch, black and white sketch, and then Blake radius, 1 color gradient, 2 color gradient. I'll just go into my gradients and do my own. The color sketch, it could be kind of neat. I will just show you really quick. So you will choose, this radius looks good. I will click OK. And now we are greeted with this kind of color sketch, but to make it look better, you want to bring maybe, let's see, bring the darks up, something like that. And now we have something that is not really a picture, but it's not really a sketch. It's just kind of, an artsy way of doing things. I am going to delete those. And let's see, what else do we have? I never used this one. I don't know what it does. And then that is pretty much it. For the next few weeks, I will make some full edits in Photoshop, and I will be using these masking techniques. So let me know if you're interested in that or not. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Skyler Ewing, and I will see you in my next video.